Secretary of the Council on Foods and Nutrition of the American Medical Association. He is also Director of the American Medical Association Department of Foods and Nutrition. Dr. White received his B.S. degree from Pennsylvania State University, his master's from Iowa State University, and his doctorate from Harvard University School of Public Health. A lot of you may know him in the light that I know him best, and that is by reading his monthly column, which is entitled Let's Talk About Food, and it is in the Today's Health magazine, which is published by the American Medical Association. He is married, and his wife is an associate professor in nutrition of the Home Economics Department at Northwestern University, and they have 2 children, I believe. He's going to talk to us today on nutritional quackery. So it's with great pleasure that I present our speaker this afternoon, Dr. Philip White. Dr. White.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fields. It's a pleasure to come down to Ball State, where I can work with my coat off, and to get a chance to work with you firsthand after I am finished with my formal remarks. So I'm looking forward to the workshop, and like our speaker this morning, any question that I can't answer, I'll pretend that the speaker tomorrow can handle for you. So that in that way, you see, the very last speaker will have no place to pass the buck, and he'll be on his own. He will answer all of the questions that have gone unanswered this week and next week. From earliest times right up to present, man has been plagued with a variety of unenlightened food experts, some of whom even claimed divine guidance. Ancient Roman literature contains references to the alleged therapeutic effectiveness of cabbage juice for a variety of conditions. It also indicates that artichoke juice was the treatment of choice for falling hair. Around the turn of this century, the American public was bombarded with newspaper advertisements for all sorts of quick and easy formulas to cure man's ills. There was the Hattie Beal Company, which advertised a preparation, plumping, good for the lean. Every Woman's Flesh Reducer, sold by a Chicago company, promised a noticeable reduction in flesh within 1 week if the powder were added to the daily bath. Newspaper testimonials for Duffy's malt whiskey claimed to have 4,000 customers over 100 years of age who attributed their longevity to this wondrous formula. Well, today, in light of scientific knowledge and public awareness, such claims seem a little absurd. But the fact remains that nutrition quackery is still with us, often disguised, however, in much more subtle forms. Misconceptions are the stock in trade of many nutrition fanatics. I'm tempted to say that misconceptions are the stock in trade of many co-eds too, but I think I better not. Established facts and concepts are distorted to fit the commercial requirements of the fanatic with something to sell. Unfortunately, some reputable food manufacturers knowingly or unknowingly misconstrue fact, thereby temporarily joining the ranks of the food fanatics, who are in reality their worst enemies. The American consumer is constantly reminded that he must become aware of health, diet, vitamins, minerals, fats, and proteins. Important nutritional facts and concepts are available, but awareness has apparently not reached the point where one can always distinguish between sound nutritional advice and a nutrition nonsense. Education has been defined as what you remember after you've forgotten what you've learned. The average American seems to keep his information current from such important resources as radio, television, magazines, and promotional literature. This I would call information without knowledge. And without the proper knowledge to evaluate such mass media information, the consumer is a vulnerable subject for the plausible-sounding stories of those with something to sell, something that will miraculously cure whatever ails him and his family. By liminal and subliminal projection, the consumer is harassed about the importance of individual food factors: proteins, vitamins, proteins, minerals, proteins, fats, proteins. Is it not to be expected that ultimately he believes that any product containing, say, protein is good no matter what the amount? It does seem strange, with the constant reiteration of the scientific point of view by reliable professional educators, that the public can still be so easily misled. Why do people, even well-informed people, rely on health food supplements or follow some particular fad diet? There are a number of reasons, in my opinion, all of which are exploited by the promoters of health foods and the authors of pseudoscientific diet books. First, the public has been led to believe that positive health benefits will result: super vitality, great endurance, freedom from illness, resistance to infections, to mention a few. Supposedly, these benefits can accrue by the supplementation of an already adequate diet. Well, they cannot. As you know, there are many factors involved in maintaining health or in combating disease. Although an important one, good nutrition is but one of these factors. The malnourished individual has little reserve with which to resist the ravages of disease compared to the well-nourished individual. The healthy person, even if he uses food supplements, is not automatically going to enjoy freedom from disease. Secondly, the user of food supplements or fad diets believes that it is impossible to obtain a proper diet without supplementation with foods such as yeast, wheat germ, bone meal, or safflower oil. These food neurotics need help. Proclaiming these fallacies is simply not sufficient. Positive education is essential. The nutrition neurotic must be re-educated to have confidence in our food supply. He or she must be convinced that in the United States, adherence to the simple rules of food selection and preparation will assure an adequate diet. Thirdly, people will use food supplements in the belief that diseases like arthritis, heart disease, cancer, infertility, fertility, even the processes of aging can be prevented or treated by a given food item. The greatest hazard in this concept, of course, is the delay in seeking competent medical services when real trouble strikes. A fourth reason people use nutrient supplements or add a fancy health food to their diet may be found in the concept of health insurance. Other than the possible accumulation of toxic amounts of the fat-soluble vitamins, there is no harm in vitamin insurance unless it is used as a crutch to justify haphazard meal planning. Well, no doubt the vitamin manufacturers would be delighted to have the nation as a whole practice vitamin insurance. It has been amply demonstrated that a variety of foods will supply the body with the essential nutrients needed for good health, and that a normal person on an adequate diet has no need for supplementation. Finally, people will try most any way out of a dilemma, such as obesity. The meteoric success of the formula weight reduction preparations illustrates this, and the formula diets were indeed meteoric. They were transiently brilliant. The phenomenal popularity of the book Calories Don't Count demonstrates that even well-informed people can be influenced by the personable writings of an unknown physician. That the majority of the users of the formula diets or of the tolerant regimen are disappointed by the results does not deter them from trying the next fad diet that comes along. Dr. Jean Mayer of Harvard has called this the rhythm method of girth control. You have all probably met at least one nutrition quack or latter-day pitchman. Frequently, the latter-day pitchman masquerades under the respectability of community leadership. Usually he is neat in appearance and sincere in his appeal, but he is a treacherous deceiver. He is a health huckster. His super special elixir containing nature's wonder foods, easy off diets, or nutritional advice will keep you young, rejuvenate you, will make you feel like a bride again. So he says. These latter-day pitchmen are very clever, and they're just out to sell. Usually they stay just within the law, just on the fringe of propriety. They know the gullible public can be confused or convinced by pseudo-scientific double talk. Their technique is the scare technique, taking advantage of the public's lack of knowledge to undermine confidence in our normal food supply and to promote their own products or techniques as the method to good and a healthy life. You're probably all familiar with one or another of our health food lecturers. These people are master pitchmen and have collected a wide assortment of unfortunate followers. To the informed person, their pronouncements often border on the absurd, but to the gullible layman they seem to offer a quick and easy remedy to every ill. Why pay a doctor bill and risk the chance of not being cured when you can be saved by alfalfa juice? A current popular example of nutritional gobbledygook is Let's Get Well by Adele Davis. Many facts and figures only confuse her nutritional scene because it is peppered with unsubstantiated statements like, quote, artificial sweeteners quickly destroy vitamin C and probably cause liver damage, hence should be avoided, unquote, or, quote, I have yet to know of a single adult to develop cancer who has habitually drunk a quart of milk daily, unquote. Data that is not applicable from animal experiments are used to support her hypothesis in humans, particularly those involved with carcinogenic factors. Other references are out of date, superseded by newer information and procedures. Adele Davis' main thesis is questionable. She implies that our modern foods are nutritionally inadequate because of scientific agriculture and processing methods. Raw milk, non-hydrogenated fats and peanut butter, stone-ground meal, non-instant powdered milk, and enormous amounts of vitamins and minerals are substituted and used in her anti-stress program for ailments ranging from varicose veins to cancer. Following this regimen assures alleviation, prevention, and sometimes cure, according to Ms. Davis, although she graciously admits that there are some medical problems that do not respond to nutrition. Almost every known disease is described in the book, Let's Get Well. Variations of her anti-stress program and psychotherapy are skillfully mixed with nutritional information as palliatives to confuse the reader with a somewhat hazy knowledge of nutrition. A considerable amount of nonsense is being beamed specifically at the aging population. The huckster promoting food supplements claims that nutritional requirements, vitamins, minerals, and proteins, and so forth, that the requirements for these increase with age. Well, there is no scientific basis for this statement. Except for a decrease in caloric requirement, people 60 years of age and over have the same nutrient requirements as people in middle age. Recognizing the fact that food habits change with age, the latter-day pitchman often claims that this leads to malnutrition. Well, there is little evidence that health is impaired by most variations in food habits. The nutriture of old people is influenced by the same factors that govern all age groups. Other health areas of concern to the oldsters which present lucrative fields for food faddists and quacks include weight reduction, elimination, general rundown conditions, and the fear of sterility or lack of virility. There is need for widespread public health nutrition education. The person who is well informed is much less likely to make unwise food choices or to be duped by the nutrition fanatic. When he hears that most diseases are due to improper diet, he will know that actual dietary deficiency diseases are rarely encountered in the United States today. When this person is told that food supplements are necessary to assure good nutrition, she will know that an adequate diet can easily be obtained through our normal food supply, and the vitamin craze will not affect, since it will be realized that medical science does not at all advocate vitamin supplementation for the average person. Even the argument that subclinical deficiencies are a constant threat to everyone will not catch his eye. He will realize that there is no proven basis for attributing these to a lack of certain nutrients, and that some health food is not the answer. The informed person will realize that modern methods of processing, transportation, and storage of foods are designed to protect the nutrients. He will know that standards of identity provide for enrichment of certain foods in cases where nutrients are lost in processing, or the food is a logical vehicle for vitamin and mineral fortification. Federal and state regulations are not enough to combat nutrition misinformation. The consumer herself must be knowledgeable so that she can ferret the truth from the mass of food facts and policies surrounding. All reliable agencies must concentrate on equipping the consumer with the knowledge needed to distinguish fact from fancy. Wider dissemination of nutrition facts with a positive emphasis on good nutrition practices may eventually be the weapon that will put food faddism and quackery on the retreat. The primary responsibility of the nutrition educator is to assist people to achieve an adequate diet. Excuse me. We can say in general that the nutritional status of our population is fairly good. We should not, however, assume that all segments of our population are nourished as well as they could be. The attention of nutrition educators is now turning to the specific problems encountered by those who, for one reason or another, appear unable to enjoy adequate nutrient intake. Dr. Wendell Griffith, in a lecture at the dedication of the Biochemistry and Nutrition Building at the Virginia Polytechnic Institute, addressed himself to this problem. And I'd like to quote from Dr. Griffith. What is the solution of the predicament we are in if an appreciable, even if small, proportion of the population fails to consume a good diet despite the availability of the necessary foodstuffs and despite the establishment of a proper dietary standard? Well, three measures are possible. The provision of supplementary nutrients in the form of tablets or capsules as a routine procedure. The extended fortification or enrichment of foods as part of an endeavor to make many commonly used foodstuffs nutritionally complete with respect to all nutrients, or the devising of educational procedures that will inform about nutritional health, persuade that it is worth having, and demonstrate how it may be attained. Presumably, most of us believe that the third measure must be far more effective than has been the case up to the present. It cannot be denied, however, that national dietary surveys provided information for those who believe sincerely that as nutritionists, we are negligent if we do not advocate large-scale use of supplementary nutrients and of enriched foodstuffs. End quotation. Well, can the apparent dependence of millions of people on food supplements be traced to effective or too effective programs in nutrition education? Do nutrition educators inadvertently encourage people to use vitamins and mineral preparations by overemphasis of the amount of nutrients needed and the importance of timing in the diet? It seems to me that educators who overplay their hand may lead to the ultimate defeat of nutrition education. Nutrition education for the general public should be phrased in the simplest possible terms. Excessive detail and complication, especially when considering the individual nutrients and their function, should be kept to a minimum. There is a tendency to be excessively complicated, although we recognize that the success of Adele Davis and Carlton Fredericks is traceable in part to the detailed information they provide, but almost always followed by a false interpretation, leading ultimately to truly excessive claims of health benefits. Nutrition quacks make promises and hold out hope that qualified nutrition educators would never dream of doing. One of the problems that plagues the nutrition educator is the confusion that surrounds the United States reference standards in nutrition. Dr. Griffith, in the same address, phrased it this way: the need of a thoroughly realistic listing of minimal requirements of nutrients as a part of our own dietary standards appears overwhelming. The listing preferably should be in ranges rather than as a single value for each nutrient. A published statement of a range of minimum nutrient requirements will encourage our nutrition educators, who now on occasion talk with tongue-in-cheek, and will allow us to speak in common language with consumers of food at home and throughout the world. Such a listing will not preclude the simultaneous preparation of recommended dietary allowances according to a phased schedule. Allowances that will include appropriate factors of safety and that will ensure optimal nutrition as an objective to be realized as rapidly as the cooperative endeavors of agriculture, economics, education, and the food and nutrition scientists will permit. There are a number of concepts that must be strengthened if our national nutrition education programs are to continue with good success. In large measure, nutrition education should be a family responsibility. Certainly, development of sound food habits, information in proper food selection and preparation should begin at home. This should perhaps be one of the major goals of nutrition education. Since the educational environment in the home is so closely linked to the environment of public school education, it is not surprising that many educators turn to the schools for additional support in the training of children. It has been suggested that school teachers be certified or qualified to teach nutrition. This suggestion has merit. However, the implementation of the suggestion will have to wait until there are qualified instructors in nutrition in all universities, colleges, and teachers' colleges. Not long ago, on the spur of the moment, we asked a number of consultants to list priority topics for a national program in corrective nutrition education. And the following list, although incomplete, was given in order of priority. First, the use and abuse of vitamin and mineral preparations and other food supplements. Second, health lecturers who practice medicine without a license, such as Adele Davis and Carlton Fredericks. C, abuses in weight control plans and products. D, the lack of means or criteria to identify who is a qualified nutritionist. Next, the care and nutrition of the aged. And finally, certain current food promotion and advertising practices, including both health foods and ordinary foods. Current abusive food advertising is exemplified by the emphasis on polyunsaturation. Two of these topics deserve special mention because they act as deterrents to consistency in nutrition education. First, the inability to determine who is and who is not qualified to advise on nutrition. This is perhaps one of the main reasons why fanatics can enjoy such lucrative careers. Witness the doctors Jarvis, Crane, and Toller. Witness Adele Davis, Carlton Fredericks, Gaylord Hauser, Dan Dale Alexander, and Royal Lee. If there were some way that the public could immediately identify the source of information on nutrition, the nutrition quack would have a hard time indeed. It is unfortunate that such books as Calories Don't Count and Folk Medicine became so popular. And this will continue to be a problem until the medical profession is willing to exert more influence over its members. The second topic worthy of special mention is abusive advertising. Food advertising, unfortunately, often is a deterrent to good nutrition education. Based upon research and experience, we have taught that a varied diet of carefully selected and prepared foods will provide all of the known and unknown nutrients needed for the maintenance of good health. We have taught that foods are the preferred source of nutrients and that no single food is essential. We have taught that physical well-being results from a way of life that includes good nutrition, proper exercise, and sufficient rest. We have tried to keep nutrition and health education simple and uncomplicated. Now, review in your minds advertising for breakfast foods, margarine, salad and cooking oils, and bread. Adele Davis, late of Michigan, once stated that she wished nutrition educators could devote more time to positive education and less to apologizing for the silly product design and advertising by the food industry. There is an interesting question of who is responsible for abusive or erroneous food advertising, the company or the advertising agency. In my opinion, the company should be held responsible since its name is on the ad, and the ad agency, after all, is an agent of the company. Well, I don't wish to overemphasize abusive food advertising, and we have found in recent times that relatively few food products are advertised with nutritional claims. This may be fortunate since in almost every instance when nutritional claims are made or a nutrition story is told, it is in some respect incorrect and misleading. Claims confuse the consumer and are thus divisive forces in nutrition education. The current situation was recently summarized by the American Dairy Association. A growing problem of the food industry is to keep from being lost in a welter of claims and counterclaims for miracle products that are here today and gone tomorrow, gone with a big pocketful of consumer cash that will never then be used to buy the foods that have brought Americans to their high level of good health and enjoyable eating. All this points up to the need for supplying consumers with understandable food facts. End quote. Now, what can we do about the nutrition problems mentioned earlier? It seems to me that a great deal more can be accomplished with the young person before and after adolescence and during adolescence. Somehow mothers and fathers must be made to accept the responsibility for preparing their children for adolescence. And this takes about 11 years for girls and maybe 12 years for boys. Poor food habits that are well established prior to adolescence are unlikely to show much improvement during adolescence. After adolescence and as young parents, these people are more responsive to nutrition education and more concerned with the health of their children. For this reason, nutrition education programs should be based upon the concept that future gains are more significant than immediate returns. In the time remaining, I would like to discuss those forces which work in the United States that are best characterized as being involved in counter-education. These are the people we commonly classify as food quacks or nutrition fanatics. These are the people who sell their concepts and products on the basis of foods for health. Sometimes they promote food as a means of preventing disease. In recent years, several new forces have begun to exert influence on the consumer, or have begun to speak on behalf of the consumer. And I would like to alert you to some of these agencies because present indications are they will become more influential. The first is the Federation of Homemakers. The Federation of Homemakers with Mrs. Ruth Desmond as president. The Federation of Homemakers is pledged to fight what they consider the dangerous trend by American food processors to add chemicals and other additives to their products. If any of you, I suppose it's unlikely that you had anything to do with peanut butter in the last year or two, but their Food and Drug Administration attempted to write standards of identity. Now these are regulations that define the maximum amount of an ingredient or the minimum amount of an ingredient in some cases that may be used in the manufacture of a food which will be called by a generic name. Something that's called peanut butter should have so much peanut, so much oil, salt, and so forth. The public hearings on the standards of identity for peanut butter took about 6 months, and Mrs. Ruth Desmond, on behalf of the Homemakers Federation, was there and interviewed every single witness and completely dominated the whole trial, and I think was primarily responsible for the fact that this simple decision of whether peanut butter should be 95% peanuts or 90% peanuts cost both the government and industry over $1 million. And I think we're going to hear more from her in some proposed revisions for the Food and Drug Regulations concerned with special dietary foods. The Federation of Homemakers, and please understand the name Federation of Homemakers, this is not the organization perhaps you're thinking of, is pledged to fight over-fabrication of foods. And this is an example of Mrs. Desmond's reasoning that I'm quoting. Well, for my own self, My criteria is still to try to get food as nearly like the foods I purchased when I was first married. We lived in New York City, and at that time, 1938 to about 1941, I could get such fine quality foods if I went to the good stores. So even now, in our family, we do not rely on packaged foods at all. We do use some frozen vegetables and sometimes some frozen foods, but as a whole, we eat the simple meats and baked potatoes boiled with their skins on, and this type of food. And until my daughter married and went away, we used to bake our own bread. I even now make my own mayonnaise and my own ice cream. Many of our products I'd make as we did in the past, and therefore I find that I have excellent food in my home. But if I shop, as so many of my friends do, I'm sure I would come home with what I call ersatz food. This is the woman who's speaking for the homemaker. The Federation of Homemakers has joined forces with Carlton Fredericks, the National Health Federation, and the Natural Food Association. And Mrs. Desmond has twice invited Carlton Fredericks to ask his listeners to write to the Food and Drug Administration in support of the questionable proposals for revised food regulations. I don't know if Carlton Fredericks' radio broadcasts reach into this part of the country. It doesn't into Chicago, thank goodness. He does? Doesn't. Well, then you don't know who I'm talking about, do you, when I talk about Carlton Fredericks? Well, Carlton Fredericks is a man who obtained a PhD in health education, I believe, at Columbia University in the middle 40s. And it's never been quite straightened out whether he did in fact qualify for the degree, because the university wanted to retract the degree. He has written quite a number of books that have sold very well, and he has a network of radio programs over WOR. I think he at one time had 150, 200 stations. He's a very smooth talker and quite well-informed individual, but he unfortunately likes to take a whack at everything that I think is good and reasonable in United States health practices. And he loves to take the AMA apart, and he loves to take Frederick J. Stair and others apart. And he's the kind of man, for example, who will tell his listeners with a perfectly straight face that liver disease can be cured by the ingestion of a large quantity of vitamin B1, and then finds some reference to prove it. He's been a thorn in the side of the Food and Drug Administration for quite a long time, and I was involved with a small number of people who went to the Federal Communications Commission in Washington to see if we couldn't urge that he not be permitted to broadcast his programs on the basis that he was in fact practicing medicine without a license. This was the time when you had to disclose all of the, you still do I guess, had to disclose the supporters and purchasers of time on a program. You remember that, was it that disc jockeys could give all kinds of supposedly free plugs for products, and then we learned later on that they were taking money under the table and all this sort of thing. Well, Fredericks was doing quite the same thing, because he was the consultant to a company that prepared food supplements, Vitamins Plus Incorporated. And whenever people would write into his program to ask him a question or to ask him to comment on the program, he would send the catalog for this food supplement company to his listeners. And that got him into trouble, and he eventually lost the network, but he's regaining it again. The first time I heard him, he went through that beautiful monologue of the fellow who went down into the basement to empty the wine bottles, and he pulled the cork out of the first bottle and poured the bottle down the drain. Then he pulled the cork out of the second bottle and he drank a little bit of it, and then poured the bottle down the drain. And then he poured the bottle out of the second cork and poured the drain down the cup, and so forth. Well, it's a pat thing. I can't possibly do it. And he went through it without fault, supposedly memorized. So he's a spellbinder, but he's an unfortunate person because he's spreading misinformation. Another agency that I think bears watching is called the National Health Federation. National Health Federation. This is an organization with a claimed membership of in excess of 10,000, dedicated to combat health monopolies and to challenge the authority of the Food and Drug Administration. It claims to serve as a watchdog and as the guardian of the health needs and interests of the people. It is more of a watchdog of the commercial interests of its members. The Federation maintains close contact with the Natural Foods Association, osteopaths, chiropractors, naturopaths. It has set itself up as an antagonist to the AMA, which in itself is not bad, except that it will use whatever means it can devise to twist and turn statements and issues to the detriment of the American Medical Association. But perhaps its greatest enemy is Frederick J. Stare of Harvard, and many pages of its monthly bulletin are devoted to tirades against Dr. Stare. The belief of the consumer that superior health and freedom from disease can accrue from the use of health foods is strong and not easily dissuaded. Unless his diet contains some exotic seed, bone meal, yeast, or perhaps organically grown food, the consumer is convinced that he is nutritionally impoverished. Thus, the consumer loses faith in conventional foods and becomes a nutrition neurotic. Dependence on unusual and esoteric food, the belief that organically grown foods are the only reliable foods, the use of far-out food supplements and natural vitamins, the willingness to try any new reducing regimen, loss of faith in modern food processing, and the fear that conventional foods cause degenerative diseases are the characteristics of the nutrition neurotic. The true neurotic however, is probably the on-again, off-again dieter who often falls prey to the latest diet craze regardless of his previous failures. Unfortunately, the science of nutrition, physiology, and psychology have not yet discovered all of the answers to the problem of obesity. Until such time, many will presumably experience failure after failure in their efforts to reduce, and prevention is still the best treatment for obesity. The promoters of these strange attitudes concerning the food supply are easy to identify. They reap their fortunes while extolling the virtues of tiger's milk, desiccated liver, wheat germ, brewer's yeast, halibut liver oil, vitamin E, bone meal, and sunflower seeds. And this seems to be the trademark of Prevention magazine with J.I. Rodale. The profits are made through the sale of books and magazines, not to mention popular public lectures or sales of their own brands of naturized food supplements. These leaders promote their philosophies by half-truths, innuendos, and wild promises of glowing health, making their statements difficult, if not impossible, to combat. Anyone, however, can contribute directly or indirectly to misinformation, and it is sometimes difficult to separate fact from fiction. Unfortunately, misinformation on food, nutrition, health, or disease, whether it arises from the misleading statements and untruths of the fattest promoter and nutrition neurotic, or the often misinterpreted pronouncements of the eminent doctor and scientist, can attract the attention of the lay public. When authoritative scientific information is prematurely reported or is reported out of context, it too can contribute to nutrition nonsense, and this is unforgivable. Recent examples of information which has been misused are as follows. The high-fat, low-carbohydrate, liquor-aplenty reducing diets. Attachment of the name of Mayo to an ill-conceived weight reduction regimen. And save your arteries with safflower oil saga. The government, the food industry and its associations, educational institutions, the medical professions and allied professions all have a responsibility to educate the consumer to distinguish fact from fancy. The nutrition neurotics and the food fattists need help. Adequate public health information is a must.